and welcome to More Than Mindfulness. I'm Becky Muller with Body Soul School. Today we're going to talk about mindfulness and mental health. What is the connection there? And what does mindfulness have to offer and expand our current conversations around mental health? So first of all, I would just invite you to consider the way you think about mental health and the way you think about your own mental health, the kind of resources that come to mind when we start talking about mental health resources, and the kind of words that come to mind when you start thinking about mental health. And just noticing if even the term mental health itself feels safe and familiar to you, like something you're open to and feels comfortable exploring, that feels personal, or if it feels kind of like something that is pushing away from, or that feels scary or clinical. For most of my life, conversations around mental health seem to fall under things like labels or diagnoses or conditions, mostly things that felt kind of extreme, kind of black and white, and that often brought to mind somebody else. Like, oh, maybe I've heard of someone else suffering from that mental health condition, or that the idea of having a problem with mental health felt very scary and even shameful. Now, this started to change for me when I was a senior in high school and was struggling with an eating disorder. And I had seen myself and been seen by my community as very capable and very successful, and certainly not someone who I would ever have wanted to take on the label of having a mental health issue. And I still remember the first time I sat down in a therapist's office and just absolutely felt like this sense of panic or kind of surreal, like I was watching somebody else in a dream, because I was not the kind of person that needed mental health help. That was like for those kind of people. Now, for my late teen years into my adult years, and then moving through betrayal trauma and relationship difficulties that took me back down to a place where I knew and couldn't deny the fact that I needed help learning how to cope with my life. I needed new tools. I needed a new vocabulary. I couldn't keep doing the same thing I was doing because I had hit a dead end where I really felt that I could no longer function in that way. This is the place where I found mental health help through a traditional avenue, through therapy. And I also began on a path of healing through 12-step communities. In addition, I also found this world of mindfulness and meditation. And this world shifted everything for me, because instead of seeing mental health and my own sense of wellness as something black and white that was riddled with labels, I started to understand that the feelings and emotions I was suffering with didn't make me crazy. It didn't make me broken in any unique way. It made me supremely human. As I learned how to apply the lens of mindfulness, I began to understand that the ways I was operating dysfunctionally ultimately came back to my own fractured sense of self. Consider this tree. Typically, the way we view mental health is we look at these labels that we see on the branches of this tree. We label someone with a condition, and a lot of times we internalize that condition, and that condition kind of becomes a core sense of our identity even. It becomes a way that we feel we're operating in the world, and it even provides some sense of safety or belonging. I am in trauma. I am an addict. I have depression. I have anxiety. So how do we approach these things when we're focused solely on the branches? Typically, we might accept one of those labels. We might begin taking medication. Perhaps we do some sort of therapy that focuses on behavior modifications or tools we can use to manage. But what mindfulness offered me, and the path I found through mindfulness, felt completely different than those approaches. Mindfulness offered me a pathway back to the very roots of what was creating the emotions, the behaviors, the unmanageability that I was experiencing in my life. And while there was certainly a physiological aspect to the way I was operating and to what my brain and body were doing, that physiological response was also tied really closely to the way I was viewing myself, the way I was defining myself, and the fractured sense of self that I was operating through in the world. Now, the beautiful thing about spiritual awakening is that sooner or later, all of us wake up to the fact that we are in some way operating through a false sense of self. And we're faced with an option. We can continue to push through, to sweep things under the rug, to endure to the end, and to cling to the very ways of being that have brought us to the very moment of unmanageability. Or we can step into the unknown and begin to unravel and begin to heal. In our conversations around mental health, we're typically talking about medicating and managing, but how often are we talking about healing? And what would happen if we could widen our perspective and expand our view and start to see mental health as not just a condition or a label, but instead a sign that something inside us on a soul level is crying out for care and is signaling that we have misaligned ourselves in some way. One of the main differences between a traditional mental health perspective and a mindfulness perspective is that in traditional mental health perspectives, we typically think about ourselves as broken or damaged, and that something or someone out here is going to fix us, and that we're dependent on something or someone out here. Whereas mindfulness invites us into this belief system and understanding that what we really need to heal is already here. It's already within us. That there is a part of us that is perfectly whole and aligned. And that it's learning how to unwind the spell and find our way back to that part of us that perfectly knows how to move through this moment without fear, without that false self that creates chaos and confusion, disconnection. Mindfulness and meditation offer a gentle and universal pathway to this process of healing. As the late, great Thich Nhat Hanh says, this pathway is all about deeply looking. These practices of deep looking point us to the inner resources that can help us trace back the limiting beliefs, the fractured sense of self, the hidden traumas that create a background static of fear, a sense of never enoughness in our daily lives. For me, this process of deep looking took me from being very focused on managing branches to becoming very curious and awakening to the roots of what was creating those branches in my life. The misplaced sense of my identity, a lack of understanding of how to work with my thoughts. I didn't know how my mind worked. Understanding the different parts of my brain, how trauma works, the polyvagal theory, all of this information that helped me understand why my body and mind were responding the way they were responding, and the triggers that were activating that fight, flight, freeze response in big ways and small. I also really had a lack of recognition around trauma and had no understanding of what it really takes to heal from trauma. I had a lack of understanding of my emotions, their transitory nature, how to move through them, how to listen to them and allow them to become my teachers. Before finding mindfulness, I felt confusion and shame around the places in my life and the seasons of my life that felt unmanageable and dysfunctional. I felt like I should just get over it or not take myself so seriously. It didn't make sense to me that I just couldn't shake it off. But these very things that could easily have been labeled a condition and medicated have become the vehicle to an entirely new way of being in the world, a way of healing, a way of seeing myself more clearly, a way of being in relationship in healthier and more authentic ways, a new and more intimate and personal relationship with a God of my very own understanding. The fact is that most of us, even all of us as humans, are in need of a soul excavation sooner or later, and not just once, but over and over again. Mindfulness offers a refuge from the almost never-ending treadmill of anxiety, the pursuit of success, the desperate desire to matter, the fear around war and climate change, the polarization of political anger and blame, the almost incessant IV of stimulated emotions that we can plug to on an almost constant basis through most news outlets. Where is your peace? With mindfulness, it is inside of you. It is in the stillness. It is in the present moment. At Body Soul School, we believe that all people everywhere have access to this never-ending wellspring of insight, wisdom, and truth. It is the peace that passeth all understanding, and it doesn't belong to any one culture, religion, or people. It is the universal thread that defines the human condition. We believe that these practices of deep looking should be integrated into all of our conversations around mental health and considered as some of our most effective long-term mental health interventions. We look forward to a future that is less about labels and fear and more about compassion, community, and coming together to truly know and see ourselves as we are in all our beauty and brokenness. Until we do, we can never see the other. If you're interested in exploring mindfulness as a way to improve your mental health and physical health, we are launching our first online course. It's an 18-week program that's a deep dive into mental and physical and emotional and spiritual wellness and awareness. You can still hop in and join us. Check it out at bodysoulschool.com.